say we're starting with the webinar. So it's nice to see Liverpool, Switzerland, UK, Paris, Amsterdam. So it's really great to have you all here. So then, officially, welcome everyone. It's our first We Speak webinar, and from She Sports Switzerland, I'm very proud that the whole team and everybody managed to do that in this year. We want to talk today about women in sports media and talk about perspective, a little bit maybe about the patriarchy, and most of all about the possibilities we have in the sports media industry. My name is Marisa Reich. I'm the chair of She Sports Switzerland, and we are a young non-profit organization based here in Switzerland with members from around the world. And our goals are to create a level playing field for women working in sports, to provide tools, to give resources and support to help them get into the positions they want to, and to create a community and network for women and men along that way. And as I said, I'm very happy that so many from all around the world, Buenos Aires, I see Dubai, joined us today. And I have three extraordinary women with me, and I'm really happy that they found the time and kick this webinar series off with us. First of all, I have here Julia Fry. For many years, Julia and I worked together at the London Marathon and the World Marathon Majors. And today, Julia is head of communications for Extreme E, a series which brings electric racing to remote places to highlight the climate change challenges faced by different ecosystems, while showcasing the performance of all electric SUVs in extreme conditions. Welcome, Julia.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Marissa.
Then I have Ekta Hatton with me today. Ekta is head of the Broadcast Academy from HBS. And in my former role at Infront, I got to know Ekta and of course the HBS Broadcast Academy. The mission of them is to share broadcasting and sports directing knowledge to improve sports broadcasting standards at an international level. They have been delivering their programs in more than 20 countries around the world and trained more than 10,000 TV professionals from various fields. And one of their core missions is to increase the number of women in sports broadcasting. Welcome, Ekta.
Thank you so much. So pleased to be here, and good morning from California.
Yes. And last but not least, I have with me Lucia Montanarella from the IOC. Lucia works since 30 years in the sports media industry and is head of Olympic Games media operations and leads the Olympic Information Service. The Olympic Information Service is a professional sports reporting and information service designed to keep the accredited media informed and to help them achieve the best possible coverage of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. Welcome, Lucia.
Thank you very much, Marisa. I'm very happy to be here, and especially to see so many known people connecting and seeing a few males connecting, which is very good as well.
They're important. We will come to that definitely today. So you all have been in the sports media business for decades now, and we often look back to see where we're coming from. And I recently wrote also an article to point out that, for example, it was just 150 years ago that we were allowed to do sports. Before that, it was for women forbidden to do sports. And I think what helps us to, when we acknowledge that, to see how far we have come. And Lucia mentioned it, that you started 30 years ago. So you started in Italy at a newspaper. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't the way it is today back then. So maybe you can tell us a little bit how it was 30 years ago when you started.
Yes, you're right, Marisa, and we talked about it. Yes, it was very different. I was just out of university and totally out of luck. I got offered a position on a newspaper sports desk. I was obviously naive and young, and I had not realized that in sports there was a big difference whether you were a male or a female. I only realized that once I hit the office and the newspaper, and I realized that I was very much the only girl there. I also realized that, well, in my country, there are basically two sports that are considered sports, which is football and soccer, or however you call it, and Formula One. And so all of the rest of the sports were considered minor sports. So as soon as I joined the newspaper, I was obviously assigned to minor sports, which with hindsight has been my fortune, because it has exposed me to all of those sports that are actually in the Olympic program. And I did start, having a hint to my, let's say, Olympic career by being assigned to minor sports. But for sure, those first days, and I mean, we're talking about, I joined the newspaper in 1990. And for sure, those days, what I felt was that you had to prove yourself much more than your male colleagues to get to go to events, to get to go and cover live sports, to get to have headlines on the front page. And it was very clear. It took me a while to realize it, because I said I was very naive at the time, and I just hadn't realized that that was the word. And if you look back now, even in my own country, which I follow the media industry there, it is extremely different. It is extremely different, and there are many more sports journalists and that follow the sports. So actually, that's a good thing to see.
Mm. Great. Julia, we both started at the same event, the London Marathon, and actually our boss back then was a woman, Nicola Oke. And for me, it would be interesting how your start was in the industry and how much you think role models play a role for you or are important for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marissa, I think now that was probably over a decade, maybe 15 years ago that we
I think it was 20 years ago almost.
Oh gosh. Well, I haven't been in the game as long as Lucia and Hector, but yes, I personally have had a really positive experience. I think you mentioned role models there. I don't know whether I've just been very lucky or not, but in every role I've had, from my first PR agency to coming into my first press office to coming to my first Olympics and walking in and seeing Lucia on the panel leading the sessions, I've seen incredible female role models around me in the sport, and continue to, I think we'll talk about this later, but continue to look to not only look up to them, but to bring in the next generation too. And I think, that's been down to a lot of the hard work that Lucia just mentioned, that she faced, early on in her career. But I think role models are so important, because when you see women at the top in these leadership positions, running the sports events and running the workrooms and the whole organizations, it's truly inspiring as somebody starting off in their career, as you really think, okay, this could be me. And I realize that is not everyone's experience though, and much as it's been mine, and it's been really positive and no doubt has helped me kind of further my career, by seeing the possibilities. There are issues still. We're not seeing, whilst you might see those around you in sports events, you're not necessarily seeing them, on the pitches, in the athlete sense, in front of the cameras. And I'm sure Hector is about to talk a bit more about that side of her experience of it. But yeah, I think role models are so important for us all. And again, I think Lucia and Hector and the women that have come that have proved to be role models to me have been hugely influential to me. So I mentioned Lucia there. She was, I don't think we've talked about it, but Vancouver Olympics, she was the first female head of press for an Olympics ever. And maybe I wasn't aware of that because I came in and saw her there, but didn't appreciate the journey and the fact that she was first. So hopefully we continue to have less firsts and more of the Lucias and the great role models around us. But yeah, that's been my experience so far, and something I hope to be, well, not sure I can ever say a role model, but to help people come through, that are just starting now as well.
And I think that's important. And I mean, now also coming to Hector, I mean, what you do with the Broadcast Academy. I think it's just fabulous. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
And you should also tell us how you started, because I think you already also broke some glass ceilings like Lucia did.
I think I consider myself more a path facilitator than a path breaker. And I also started 18 years ago. I still feel I'm quite young in the industry, and I started developing talent on the field with Manchester United Soccer Schools Academy. I was the manager there and the ICC Global Cricket Academy manager. I was the first woman, Indian woman in my organization in a senior position. I didn't see many people like me there at all. And currently, I'm so privileged to be part of this team that is developing talent off the field, because this is one area of sports media, as I explained, it's such a huge umbrella that is definitely where we need to go a long way. I also feel that that I can never forget at Manchester United Soccer Schools, it was obviously a Middle Eastern country that I was operating in. And we had about 550 boys on the field. And there was one girl, and she was very keen to join, and she was an Emirati girl. And I still remember her name, and her name was Delia Ghazi. And she, for me, was the path breaker, because after having a short conversation, I convinced her to get on the field. And she played all on her own with 500 boys on the field. And that's the courage that inspires me. And soon, I think it was only a matter of few months, we had a team of women, girl players. And I think that's exactly taking on the point from Julia. And I see that in my industry today as well. I think we are focusing on working by getting these first women directors in a particular sport, in a particular country, in a particular organization. And we know once we have that, you can be what you can see. There will be others who will follow. So that's my story.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. And what I liked, for example, Julia, when we talked also earlier, that you wanted to play football, but somehow you didn't.
Yeah, that's right. When I was growing up, I still am, but I was sports mad and playing everything I could, but football was my sport. And honestly, people used to ask me what I wanted to be when I was older, and I would say a boy, and I was a total tomboy. And I only recently worked out, why, and it was because I wanted to play football, and I didn't see any female footballers out there. So I just figured you had to be male to have those opportunities. So, I mean, if I knew now that there were more opportunities coming, I wouldn't have cut my hair off and really tried to be a boy, but it would have saved me some awful pictures from my childhood. But I just feel really grateful for the kids growing up these days, that there are more female role models in sport, but not yet at the same level. So there's still work to be done. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was great seeing also now the news that in Paris 2024, there will be 50-50 representation of male and female athletes. And I think that's a first go. But I think, maybe Lucia, you can tell us a little more about also what the IOC does, because it's great to have it on the pitch, like in the 1900 when it started, we started with 2, 3, 4 people, or 4 women in the Olympic Games, now becoming equal on that field. And yet still, when you look at, for example, accredited media at the Olympics, it is still around roughly 20% probably, yeah. And same for, or even lower sometimes when you look then at the organizations and federations. So what is your take on that?
You're right in everything you're saying. You're depicting the right picture. Obviously, yeah, we're all very pleased, and I'm sure that every single woman, especially working in the Olympic movement, celebrated the news about the 50-50 for the Paris 2024 Olympic program. I just want to remember that was one of the recommendations of the Olympic Agenda 2020. So it was great to see that actually by the end of 2020, that was actually achieved. In media operation, we've actually been looking at this. We started in 2015, I think, looking at women in sports media and how the IOC actually could bring the discussion to the table. I think I always say I don't think that you can change the world, But what I think is very effective is bringing the discussion to the table. So even before then, when the IOC started the Young Reporter programs in 2010, we decided from the very beginning that we would accept 50% of the quota would be female young reporters and 50% male young reporters. Mm-hmm. And that's become a feature, and we've always had equal selection of young reporters by gender. One really interesting example, I think, is regarding press accreditation that you've mentioned. So you might have seen, because it was published by my former colleague Anthony Edgar. He was very attentive and very sensitive on this topic, and he's done a lot of work even before I joined the IOC. And in Pyeongchang, I do remember we were still in the main press center in Pyeongchang after the closing ceremony. We were looking at the numbers of the actual validated press accreditation. And we realized that overall, as you say, there was 18.9% was women. And what was shocking was that was 9.7% were the photographers. And then we've been going through agency by agency, media organization by media organization, because obviously there are bigger organizations. And we actually published the data from Pyeongchang, which showed that some of the big agencies, they were not doing very well. I'm sure that my friend Osh Shine, who is the sports editor of Reuters, will not mind if I take him as an example. He's, I think, used for me to pick him as an example. But Reuters in Pyeongchang, they had 20.4% of women accredited of their whole reporting team, of which only 3.1% were photographers. So we had those discussions with the agency. Said, you know, guys, I mean, you need to do better. Mm-hmm. And what is incredible is that how receptive they've been to those discussions, mm-hmm. and how many times we've heard, oh, we didn't even know, we haven't even noticed, and we haven't even been looking. We have lots of women in our organization, but we haven't even thought about it. Mm-hmm. So actually, Osh, he committed that he would do better for Tokyo. And I was just looking at the numbers for the Tokyo accreditation that we already have, because as you know, when the postponement happened, the press accreditation was already completed, the process. Mm-hmm. And Reuters in Tokyo, not only they have 36.5% of their accredited delegation is female, so it's gone up from 18.9 from Pyeongchang, but 31.3% of their whole quota is photographers, going up from 3.1.
It's a big increase.
It's a huge increase. And really what he said is that it's just been thinking about it and going around our bureaus and offer the opportunity to cover the games to our female photographers and to our sports reporters that maybe they cover sports all year round, but then they never made it to the Olympic team for some reason, which is not because they were not selected, but maybe because they would not put up the hand because they wouldn't want to afford 4 weeks away from the family. Yeah. Or maybe the editor assuming that they would not want to be away from the children for 4 weeks. So there's a lot of, and he said, you know, it was all based on assumption, but those conversations had not happened. Yeah. And so this example makes me realize that, and I think I've said it also when we talked the other day, Marisa, I think that the great opportunity we all have is to have those conversations, because a lot of time people just don't think about it, you know, and it's so yeah, I mean, there's lots that we're doing. I mean, within the IOC, there is a gender equality project that was started in 2017, which has brought a lot of initiatives, including you might have heard the balancing the gender balance of the competition schedule. There was a study that was very interesting, I found, that was basically showing that on the last day of the games, both at summer games and winter games, the number of women events was minimal, resulting that on the last day of the games, which obviously is a Sunday, which we know that also for TV coverage is prime, there was no exposure of women's sports. That's been changed. I mean, in between Sochi and Pyeongchang, there's been a really, really significant change. There were no women events on the final day in Sochi. In Pyeongchang, there have been more women events included.
Yeah.
And so these are all the initiatives, but they've all been happening from what I've been seeing, from those conversations starting, from those a few people speaking up and say, hey, why don't we look at the competition schedule, and why don't we try to balance this? Or why in some events or in some sports the female gender is ladies, and I it's all those conversations started, and I think that a lot of change happened.
It's the conversation and probably also the power of data, on different levels, because as you said, we all have the feeling. I remember press conferences back in the days, at the marathon, world marathon majors, wherever. I mean, you mainly see men. You have here and there a woman, but not really. And actor, I think in broadcasting, the number is probably not higher than 9%, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons, again, we don't have that kind of support in terms of, what we can achieve. So we do very small actions and something which is very concrete. And instead of depending on a lot of people to help us, what we thought was we launched our own Project Access. And this is something that HBS has been really passionate about. They want to leave this lasting legacy. So what we did was we said, what are these barriers to entry? The first barrier to entry is that you don't see skilled women in that position who have that kind of experience to be able to give in senior roles in a production. So what do? We create these training programs. We bring the best experts possible and we deliver this training. And we also find out with women that they have issues with funding. We provide bursaries. And we've seen the success of this program so quickly. I mean, I can give you an example. There are tens of examples that we've had since we launched 2 years ago. But just one example of a lady called Sigrid Lelevre, she from France. She did a course in February, and in October, she was directing EHF events for us. So this is the power of education, of training, of providing that skill, that mentorship that is currently lacking. And with that, we can make a difference. So those are the kind of, with Project Access, this is what we are changing. We're also creating a lot of role models. So Sigrid becomes a role model now. And she will be the one who will be inspiring. We cover her story through our social media. And we also create a lot of workshops. So whether it's media schools, whether it's broadcasting conventions, we go there and talk to young women and we say, you can do this too. Do not aspire to join an industry and be happy with taking a junior role. Look for being a sports director, sports producer, and have that control over what people see on their television.
Yeah, no, having the courage, I think also, and that's what Julia also mentioned. If she wouldn't have had female role models showing her that it is possible, then you probably wouldn't have done it, right, Julia?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I grew up in a house where, quite traditional in the sense that my dad worked, my mum stayed at home, and I don't know where I got, the desire to really go out and be the breadwinner, but I am the main earner in my family. And I think by seeing role models that are also doing that and showing you that you don't have to just follow tradition and follow the old ways, I think it definitely gives you confidence and helps you when you're looking to move forward. But I think we've talked about increasing female participation in a very visible way as well. It has to be within the organization at a high level, but seeing those people on the pitches in front of the cameras is so important. And that's what I really love about my new sport, Extreme E, which probably most people haven't even heard of, but starts next year. You mentioned about female 50-50 participation in I think it's the Paris Olympics. We recently made a sporting rule for our motorsport series that every team has to have a male and a female driver. Recently in motorsport they had the W series, which obviously was its own series for females, but we really believe that you need to be on an equal level playing field, and it's just not happened in motorsport so far. I think there's been one female in F1, and so when we came out with it, people really were excited about it. And so far I think today even we announced Molly Taylor, she's an Australian driver, We have a German driver being announced tomorrow, and another one on Friday. And suddenly you're creating these incredible role models in a sport that's been so heavily male dominated, and we're getting incredible response from people. Obviously, you do get the people saying, well, they should get there on their own credit. By giving them a spot and making it a rule, isn't that being a little bit doing it in the wrong way? It's like, well, actually, if it was fair, then we'd see more women at the top, and why not? There's no reason why not to be promoting women at the highest level. They're not getting there, so give the opportunity and make it fair to teams, and give an equal gender playing field. It's so exciting, and yeah, can't wait to see our females just showing what they can do next year. It's really great.
Absolutely. Before we maybe come to the topic of quota and tokenism, and so we just asked the participants to tell us, is your employer actively working on diversity matters? And I actually want to share that. So the majority, and I think this is really good, and this probably also highlights a little bit about what you said, Lucia and Ekta and Julia, actually, that like there are initiatives going on because it is a topic suddenly, because people speak about it. And I think what we also see, and I think we also have to realize that like almost a third, no, a quarter, says that the employer talks about it, but maybe doesn't do anything so far. And I think that's the matter of, it's also easy to quiet people a little bit, to calm them maybe down a little bit, or to maybe look at other priorities first. Some don't or didn't start yet to have initiatives, but I think it is good to see that more and more companies do it. And I think also with, the IOC taking measures, you with the HBS sector, really also bringing more women in and educating women, and Julia with new, sports coming into the playing field. We see that the topic becomes more and more important, and that people more and more need to do something. Yeah, so that's I think good to see that something is moving, and we're going forward somehow. Maybe because we have some questions, and maybe because it fits here, then said before we go to quota. For example, is the IOC now has a lot going on, and I think the biggest trouble we all see is actually bringing those measures on initiatives also to a federational level. And I think when we look in Europe or in every nation, probably it's still a big problem. So is the IOC maybe also helping or guiding the international federations a little bit to become more diverse?
Yes, we surely are trying, and as I said, we are trying to create those conversations. There's been a very interesting series of webinar actually that have been conducted by the IOC, the Gender Equality Unit at the IOC with IFs, and actually in the last, I think it was the last one that I've also attended, there was Barbara Slater, which, as you know, is the sports director of BBC, and she is also a member of the IOC press committee, and she's very much on the front line in having those conversations. And she talked about the importance of media in sport. And obviously there are lots of discussion on portrayal as well, and which is another huge topic about how women's sports is covered by the media, but for sure we are I think trying. It's very interesting, and I think that it's available online for those of you who might be interested. I think if you go on Olympic.org, you might find a document on the gender equality that is based on a number of pillars. It's portrayal, and it looks at the competition schedule at the events, at the naming of the events, and it's actually a very interesting document. So yes, the answer is yes. We are having, and a different department of the IOC are carrying on those conversations, and for sure, I think, the initiative like the 50-50 participation at the games, which obviously gets also a lot of media coverage, is a huge ambassador of the topic. Also, it's been introduced for Tokyo to have 2 flag bearers, a female and a male, for every country, and there will be a first. Now, honestly, with the countermeasures for COVID, I and I've been sitting in some meetings with national federations in Japan, and I was the only woman at the table. And so there's still a long way to go, and the reality is that different countries in the world have more or less work to do. Obviously, it's also a matter of how much people want to engage themselves, and I point my finger also at women, because I have a lot of colleagues that maybe they complain, but maybe they don't invest enough in trying to change things, or in try to overcome some stereotypes. And so I think it's as usual, it's in the hands of people, and that's why planting the seed, having those conversations, I think it's a successful recipe.
Yeah, maybe now coming to the quotas, and actually one participant wrote also that quotas displace mediocre men. They don't promote unqualified women, as supported by research done by London Business School of Economics, for example. And I also digged in a little bit about that topic. And I think, in Germany, for example, and Switzerland, quota, the word is very much on the negative side. And nobody really likes it. I think nor men nor women like that term. I always try to look at it as more as a KPI. It's bringing business. And I think, Ekta, you also said, like what you see on television is also important to shape something. And I'm a big fan of like media shapes society, and the much we talk about, and we also need to get out of our comfort zones and speak up, etc. I think it's also the media side of sports who, if we are able to push more women, like also in interviews, post-game, pre-game interviews, on the executive level, then it is also possible that it doesn't become so unnormal to see, female executives or star players, etc. playing. What do you think about quotas and the power of media?
I think, again, I mean, obviously we believe in experience, skills, training. So for me, quotas, and I've been on record to say that I don't believe in quotas in my industry, because at the end of the day, the job should be done by the best person possible, be it man or a woman. So, but I do believe from a sports federation point of view, their aim is to grow the sport. And they can only grow the sport if it's inclusive. And to be inclusive, you need to have people from different cultures or different perspectives telling you the story. If you only produce a story from one perspective, you will only be having fans from that particular audience. So I think it's good business sense for sports federations, for a sport in general, to have different perspectives. And that's why representation is really, really important. So I'm going to stick to having experience, skills, training, opportunities, and working on that. And that's what the Broadcast Academy is dedicated to doing with Project Access. And it's surprising that the amount of success that we have. I mean, one of our young women from Austria, Vera Bischler, she in 2019 won the IVC Young Pioneer Award for being the first sports director in Austria, to be directing football. And she was on the stage and saying that this is 2019 and we're still celebrating the first woman. For her, it was a sober moment. So I think there's a long way for us to go, but it has to be done the right way.
Julia, what is your take?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that. I think it's important to have a balance in telling the stories, but also within the teams. I mean, I also agree that you never want to be given a job just because of your gender. Like I certainly wouldn't want to do that just to be filling a quota. You want to be there because of your own merit and your skill set. But I think as somebody now that hires for my own team, I try to get a balance, to be honest, of male and female, but also different backgrounds, because when you're creating media campaigns and you're looking for where to target, you want those different mindsets. If you have everybody from the same background, you're likely to be looking at the similar sort of targets. And I think when I'm looking to hire, I firstly look to hire the best person for the job. But honestly, my last job at the Clip Around the World Yacht Race, our entire team was female, and I actually tried to hire some men, but they just weren't, when it came to the interview process, the women for me were stronger and worked so hard. And I'm absolutely not against hiring men either. We're going through a hiring process right now, and in some ways the balance is great, but at the moment our team is also all female. And I think it is about the right skills and the right experience first, but making sure that when you're doing your shortlisting and looking at the opportunities there, you're being very balanced. And I think that's something that people are more thoughtful of now, especially what I've seen in my experiences. But as we've pointed out here, and I honestly wasn't aware of some of the stats of the in front of camera gender diversity, there's still a long way to go. Absolutely.
I mean, how does the IOC also tackle when it comes to executive roles? Because I think this is where we have probably the biggest margins from when you look at sports, when I don't know, 84% of general sport fans also watch women's sports, or that 51 of women in general say they're sport fans. And also looking at fans at the leagues, it's between, in Europe, between 20 and 50%, depending on the sports. In the US, it's around 35% in major US sports. And still, like, we know the potential out there. And as we said, like, it's also skills and everything, and mindsets and perspectives, and getting into the brain of a female fan, for example, or what does a female sports person need, women are different and we shouldn't be as men, but often it is not reflected in the executive level. But there it happens that statutes are being made, processes are being aligned on, etc. So when we want to change the narrative, it's this sports media side, what you bring to the people, to the world, but then also in the background, getting all those guidelines ready and having that open conversation and the open mindset that things are different. What do you think, Lucia?
Yeah, I mean, I'm too new being inside the IOC, meaning that I'm with the IOC like an employee of the IOC just for a year. And I have to see that my impression is that while it might be true that we have a male president and a male director general, I actually see a lot of women that made their way up to directors level. And I think I don't have on top of my mind the statistics, but in one of the latest staff meetings, I think the statistics that they're presented in terms of the gender balance between the employee of the IOC is quite encouraging. On the other hand, yes, you see that out of, I don't know, 60 plus international federation, I think there are 3 female that are president of international federation today, which is only triathlon, golf, and curling, which is obviously extremely disappointing. Going back to the quota point, I totally agree with my colleagues here. I don't support quota. However, I think that there is no fits for all model. As I said, I think that there are cultures and countries and situations where actually having a quota might really support women's emerging. I'm saying that, for instance, in media, I know that one of the things we've done for the Tokyo Games is to say that we would set up a little quota of press accreditation that would be allocated only to females, somehow upon request, if there were some cases that we know that men in a particular country were favored, not based on skills, but just because of the power of the role they were in a newspaper or in a radio or in a media organization. And actually we've given out 15 of those for Tokyo that have been allocated specifically to women that otherwise we knew that they would have never got one. I don't know if everybody is familiar, but the press accreditation for the Olympic Games is distributed through quotas to NOCs, and then the NOCs distribute them in their countries. And obviously we've noticed that there were some countries that maybe they're favoring men and they would never ever provide a press accreditation to a woman. And that's where we felt we had to intervene. And that's where maybe a quota is actually what you need. You need to say to an NOC, or say, you know what, you have 20 accreditation, but you need to give at least 10 to women. And that, I think, could be a good way of imposing a quota. So I really think, as possibly everything in life, there's no general rule that applies to every single situation. But generally speaking, I'm totally aligned on the fact that you need to get up there because you're good at it and because of your skills. And I think that what you need to make sure is that you don't have to work double that your male colleagues to get up there. That's what really I think needs to change, because somehow we, I think, have always expected to demonstrate more than our colleagues, and that's what I felt. You know, that I always had to be excellent in everything to have the ambition to go, you know, a step higher.
And maybe we just started also another poll, like, have you ever experienced or witnessed gender-based biases in sports media? Because I think it goes to the fact, and I mean, I pointed it out in an article I wrote for Sports Pro Media, you know, the patriarchy of sports media, which, you know, probably is there, or is a topic, but only probably because nobody really talked about it. It's something nobody speaks about. And I just wonder how you feel, like, did it ever affected you? Did you ever had the feeling like something is holding you back, like some processes or structures? I often have the feeling that, for example, for board appointments, there are no clear rules who is getting onto a board, you know. Then people are promoted to a board, for example, in sports, and then somehow you see, you know, why that person is there, because there are long lasting relationships to other men or so. And when we talk about excellence, and that's, I think, also key, because nobody of us wants to just get a job because of a quota. And that's, I think, the biggest problem with the board quotas also. But we want to get a job because we bring in this experience. But women, we think differently than men. We have different perspectives than men because we are just different. So the question is, are there any, or did you experience any, I mean, sometimes you also move to another job. For example, I went away from the Berlin Marathon because I had the feeling I cannot progress there. You know, I cannot develop myself there, and I need to go in order to, you know, twist my career a little bit, to move, to go up the ladder. And sometimes it's not possible at a place where you're at. And for me, it would be interesting what you think about that, and how we can also bring men on board, that they also see that, or maybe are more attentive to what is happening, and not just, you know, nodding and say, well, it's a good choice, and then in the back maybe say, oh, why did he get the job? When we maybe have really excellent women also out there, and also other excellent men. Maybe Julia.
I don't think I've ever massively experienced it. I've heard it in my, you know, previous roles when we were looking at hiring, and we would go to our, you know, senior management team for final decisions. They would ask, you know, inappropriate questions like, well, do you think she's, I've heard people say, well, don't you think she's going to leave and have a baby in the next couple of years? as somebody that's, you know, at a similar young age and could also do that, it's really awful to hear that. And that personally to me, maybe sometimes, you know, I'm 36 now and I don't have family, but I like to think it's not too late. And you do think, you know, do people think about that when you're going for jobs? And you like to think not, but I think there is a society of men that still do think like that. But I've kind of gone the other way. And you know, my most recent hire for our PR agency was, you know, a young girl, a few years younger than me, who had a 2-year-old son. And we thought about it. And as long as, you know, she was okay with the workload and what we expected, and we were really upfront. And she's honestly been one of the best people I've ever hired. And it really helps me also see, and for yourself, Marissa, when we were at the London Marathon, you know, you had your daughter really young and you were there working and doing both. And you know, I'm lucky to be surrounded by, you know, fantastic role models that do that. But for me, I think the reason why I left my last job, probably similar to you, was didn't really feel there was that kind of support at the top level. I couldn't go any higher. It was, you know, CEO was above me, and you know, I just didn't feel like in that circumstance we had the opportunity to really grow the skill set to get to the next level. So I actually made a step, you know, not a big step, but a step downwards to move to my next job, because I thought it would be a more supportive environment, and it quickly proved true. And you know, quickly, you know, back at my same level now. And I think you have to just be aware that, you know, what you need to grow next. Are you around a supportive management that would, you know, if you chose to have a family in that career, support you and enable you to do that? I think those are the things that affect me at the moment. And I would at some point like to go higher in my career, and just working out how you can do that and with a family. But luckily, you know, I have a lot of great people above me that have done that very well and prove that it is very possible. So yeah, you definitely hear comments and see things that really that shouldn't be said. That's all.
But taking on from Julia, I think it's interesting, because when I started my career, I would go into meetings, and I would go into meetings with the operations manager, me being the general manager. And there were a lot of times that I would have no eye contact, because they would assume that I would be the junior person in that meeting. So I think that I see there's a big change in that now. When we go into meetings, there's not that assumption just because you're a woman that you would be the junior out of the two. I also feel that there is a lot of times we need to convince people that it makes business sense to hire women and to promote women. I think that's what we need to work on. We see more and more organizations, sports federations, local organization committees, they are asking, before they identify a supplier or award a contract, they're asking, can we see your diversity policy? What are your sustainability policies? And I think it cannot just be based on price, but when those parameters also come into play, I think we will see a systematic shift happening, because it's not just about us saying that it makes sense, because it has to make business sense as well.
Absolutely. What do you think, Lucia? Did you ever experience something like that, or?
No, I must say I have not experienced directly in a way that has been, let's say, shocking or affecting my work. As I said, I've been exposed to the fact that I had to prove myself more. For instance, in Vancouver, I mean, just to say a little story, when I was hired in Vancouver for the 2020 games, I was pregnant, and the person who was hiring me was a woman. However, she needed to stamp my recruitment with her boss, who was a man, and he basically tried to persuade her not to hire me, because he said she will never come back to Vancouver once she had the baby. And he was sure that I would have never, faced the job. And I felt that I had to prove him, false and wrong throughout all my path at the Vancouver Games, and work harder to show him that I was committed to the job. So that's possibly the example. But as I said, I think that what I've been exposed to is really having to prove myself a lot, and a lot of times stepping into a meeting and starting to talk and seeing the faces around me say, who's this crazy Italian that wants to tell us how to do things? And really have to prove yourself and conquer the trust from the others. And I'm sure that if I was an Italian male in many tables, it would have been different. But I've never been exposed to any directly kind of a rude comment or anything directly, no.
Yeah, it's interesting. We just asked the participants also, and there it's almost balanced between, yes, I have experienced things myself, gender-based biases, and 43% which have not experienced it. But yeah, I think it's also very probably character and also the surrounding. I mean, it can be what I realized is once I, stepped in or looked more closely to those things that, I can see it more often here and there, not so much with myself, but see it with other people. And I mean, that's where we probably also come to that, how the allyship, the mentoring part, the helping other people to also thrive and grow. And also not only women, but also men, combating stereotypes. I mean, yes, I've been also in meetings where I was the only woman, or at conferences, where you're suddenly being asked, like, can you bring a coffee? And you're like, no, I'm a participant too, but you want to bring me one? And I think those kind of things is important to realize and to work. And I think that's what we also said, you need to speak openly about it and don't put it under the rug as something like, he just said it, because no, in every sentence, in everything we say, there's a grain of truth always in it. Yeah. And if it's still ingrained in you that, you have, I mean, my dad also worked as Julia's, and my mom was also more a stay-at-home mom. Yeah, so I also have to fight biases with my own daughter. That I tell her, like I always want to tell her, obviously, like clean up. But I realized that I say it probably more to her than if she would be a boy. So I also need to, look at myself, and that's what we also said, like we need to start with ourselves and then influence our surrounding and make our surrounding aware of it. But I think, Ekta, I mean, you with the Broadcast Academy, you touch up on very much about that, mentoring part and getting women where they need to be in order to have the next level job. So what is your take on it, and what is so important about that?
I think that one of the things I would just talk about is that a lot of women that I meet, I mean, so we've done in the last 2 years, I think we've delivered courses to about 3,300 odd participants all around the world in 29 different countries. And out of them, only 500 have been women. And I think my biggest challenge that I face is the confidence issue. And so many times we meet these women, they know it, they have the skills, they have the talent, but it's about trusting that talent becomes an issue. And I think with our training, what we do is we provide them that certification or that evidence that what they know is to be true and has been expanded on, and they're ready for those jobs. So I think that's empowering them, for me, has been the most, not just for me, actually, there's a big team and my bosses, they're all involved in this. So we have a lot of men supporting women here. So you have to give them credit for this. And that without that, it's not possible, be it our experts, be it our bosses, be it people who fund these courses. So doing that is very gratifying. And I see that as the way forward, is to empower them, give them those confidence, the confidence and the opportunities to go forward. And I also tell a lot of young women who come to me for advice is to be, don't be afraid to make those calls. Ask people for coffees or advice or for mentoring. 90% of the times you'd be surprised that the people will turn around and want to help you. And this is where we need to work on more, is to giving them that confidence, not just so they can do the job, but also say to people, I want that top job.
Yeah, be open about it.
Absolutely.
What is your experience with mentoring? Do you have a mentor?
I like to think I've got like a lot, not necessarily mentors, but a lot of like community groups of women who work in sport, and I've worked with, and that we talk about things in WhatsApp groups and things, but not professionally direct a mentor. That's something actually I would like to do. I think it's just finding the time to actually carve that in when your work is so busy, but it's something you need to prioritize with, which I definitely need to do. I think one thing we talked a bit about yesterday was also just giving the credit to the men who do champion us and give us, the opportunities. And not that it's about being grateful in any way, because it's the right thing to do. But there are, as many as the incredible women that I've mentioned, there are some really incredible men out there that really are very nurturing, very, letting you dive in head first, give you total autonomy, let you make mistakes and really support you. And I think finding the right men to work with as well is really important. I have a very supportive boss, Ali Russell, who I think Hector knows as well. He's been really instrumental in shaping the female diversity in our sport as well. So giving them credit. I think yesterday, Hector, you called them she's for he's, which I think I misheard you at first, and it's definitely different to she he's. But those people that can really champion you, and I think those are also our husbands, are the fathers of our next generations. And I think getting men to feel comfortable, really being champions for women as well, it's very important. And it's also the men we marry as well, like marrying people that support your careers and also, don't hold you back. Because in previous relationships, I've literally had to walk away because I think one of my previous relationships once said, how many events are you going to have to work to make you realize you don't need to work any more events? And it was because I was away a lot. And I don't think I've ever told Lucia this, but when she gave me the job for the Vancouver Olympics 10 years ago now, almost to the day, December 2010, my boyfriend at the time didn't speak to me for 3 days because it meant I would be away over Valentine's Day. And he was so, thinking about himself and me being away. And you have to, when you work in these kind of events, you have to really choose your partner well, because some men don't like being, I've always been in a relationship where my job has probably been more interesting than theirs. And sometimes men's ego doesn't take that, and they like to bring you down and, can be too jealous. And, luckily I've chosen a man who really kind of looks after the home for me while I go traveling most of the year. And, his friends and family sometimes say that's odd and that's strange, but, he's just so proud of what I do. And I think it's about selecting those around you that can help you grow as well, and let you take those opportunities without feeling undermined or anything like that.
But also allowing that. I think that's again the stereotypes on the other side, that men are not allowed to take household chores or to work part-time or to not work or to look after children. And I think this is also where we also have to educate ourselves, women, that it is okay if a man decides to stay at home, to look after the children, to do a household, do the cooking, etc. Yeah. Lucia, did you ever had mentors or?
Yeah, but I always had male mentors. I actually work very well with men. And I've always been finding myself building also in my teams a lot of men. And I don't know why I've never really studied. It's I've always hired based on skills and the right balance in the team. I think that the only time that I actually worked, my boss was a woman, was in Vancouver, and now we are best friends. But I would say that when we talk about mentorship, I've always learned from men, which obviously they've supported me, and the fact that they were supporting as a mentee a girl speaks high of them anyway.
Yeah. No, I also think, and I mean that's because we're past the hour already. That flew by very, very quickly, and I think it also shows how much there is to talk about. Yeah, but I think what are the main key takeaways? I think we mentioned, like don't be afraid of bringing up the conversation. Yeah, go out there and talk about it. Look at yourself. Start with yourself. probably be courageous and bold, and aim for the highest. Don't the infamous imposter syndrome always kicks in, and I think we all know that, and we should fight that also a little bit. Is there anything you think what everybody can do, either for themselves or for their company, as a key takeaway?
As I said several times today, it's bringing those conversations to the table and not assuming that everybody sees it. And it could be, those conversations could be eye-opener for people who might have just not seen that way, or might have just not thought about it. And so I think bringing those conversations on the right tables is key for me.
Hector, for you?
I think I will echo what I said before. I think it's so important to empower women. I think it's really important. So reach out to people who you think they can help you. Don't hesitate in doing that. And also, I think it's really important. There's no harm in asking your organization, what's your diversity? What is our diversity policy? And you'd be surprised that if they don't have that, they might have, exactly as Lucia said, they might not have thought about it, because more and more organizations are working on a diversity policy, and they are looking at this seriously, because it will make business sense in the future, very near future. So those are the two takeaways for me.
Yeah, Julia?
I think on the chat, George Cunningham's been putting in a few comments there, and I've really liked it. It's great to see so many women on here, but it's also great to see the men kind of following the conversation as well. And George just said self-belief, and yeah, I guess it ties in with what everyone's been saying, really. Believe in yourself and work hard and be the best example of a woman working as you can be, because people are watching you as well. And I was certainly watching those above me, and I'm sure there'll be people that are watching, what we're up to, and you never know who's watching and where they could be inspired. So, and as Hector said as well, like, let people that reach out to you, give them the time and be open for a chat, talk to them about how you got into the situations, the work situations that you were lucky enough to be in, and help guide the next generation. So, and yeah, just show your kids, if you have them. I only have dogs so far, but that women can do anything that they put their minds to, and just stop the self-limiting behavior, I'd say.
Great. Yeah, it was really great having all three of you. It's very inspiring, and I hope we could always also inspire everybody out there. As said at She Sports Switzerland, that's exactly what we also try to do, either to connect people, but also to empower people to make them a little more self-confident, and because it's also about talking, and sometimes it also helps, to talk to somebody in the industry or even outside the industry, that you realize you're not alone, and seeking for help and seeking for advice, I think, is very important. So if you haven't done so, check out our website, and we're on LinkedIn. We just opened up for this a Twitch channel, so we're also now in the 21st century. And you can also watch the replay on YouTube. I say thanks a lot. A safe and happy holiday time. Please, everybody, stay healthy, wear a mask, get some distance, and that we then have maybe a better 21 in terms of live sports events, and being at one time back in the stadiums where we all love to be. And thank you very much, all three of you. It was a pleasure, and we will continue.
Thank you for getting us together. Thank you, Lucia.
Thank you for putting it together. Yeah, Julia, I loved your dog. Made a very good appearance.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, the black one.
He's enjoyed the conversation. Talk about it after.
Absolutely. Lucia, thank you so much. Thank you. Lovely to meet you. And
Thank you.
yeah. And bye, Julian. Bye, Marissa. And bye, the team as well.